Okay, let's dive into something a bit different today. We're looking at a sermon transcript from a church service.
Yeah, and it's quite detailed. It really gets into the core beliefs, the sort of operational vision of a specific Christian perspective.
Right, so we're talking faith, personal change, understanding Jesus, and also this specific church movement called Derek Bang.
Exactly. It lays out their whole understanding.
And our goal here for this deep dive is really to unpack the main ideas, pull out the key insights, see how the argument flows.
And look at the examples they use, too, the concepts. It's all quite structured.
It seems like it offers a particular framework for thinking about, well, life, struggles, faith.
Definitely. Uses personal stories, connects to the Bible. It's meant to be a guide, really, and a call to action.
Okay, so where does it all start? What's the absolute foundation, according to this sermon?
It all comes down to one core realization. Jesus is Christ. That phrase is hammered home as the absolute bedrock.
Jesus is Christ. And they really emphasize that specific wording, don't they? It's not just knowing about Jesus.
Not at all. There's a huge distinction made. It's presented as the difference between genuine and fake understanding, almost, a transformative insight.
Transformative. So how do they describe getting that? Is it just reading it?
No, it's very much about experience. The sermon says knowing means experiencing, encountering. It's not just facts in your head.
Encountering. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's meant to be something that brings, like, a breakthrough,
Yeah,
clarity.
precisely. That's the idea. A fundamental shift in understanding.
Right. So once someone supposedly grasps this, what happens next? What's the impact on the person?
Well, that leads straight into the idea of your spiritual state changing. And this concept they call engraving.
Engraving,
Yeah.
like carving something.
Kind of, yeah. The idea is that what gets deeply imprinted or engraved, especially when you're young, is incredibly powerful. They even use an example like remembering old Chinese phrases from middle school years later.
Ah, okay. So things learned deeply stick. And the point is, this truth, Jesus is Christ, needs to be engraved.
That's the argument. And if it is, it leads to this fundamental transformation.
And they offer proof, stories.
They share personal anecdotes. Someone named Choi Young met in a theater, heard the message, accepted Jesus, now involved in worship leading.
Okay. There was another one too, right? Someone in musicals.
Yes, Yoon Tae-woo came from musical practice, heard the gospel, accepted Jesus, and now the sermon says he's the lead in a musical.
Wow.
And Lee Si-yoon, a singer, is also mentioned as being impacted. These are presented as, real-world results.
So the claim is, this engraving, this understanding, it changes people dramatically.
And not just internally. The sermon is clear. Your personal spiritual state changes, so your encounters look different. It's a different field.
Yeah.
It changes.
A different field. So it impacts relationships, work, everything.
The whole scope, yeah. Family, community, your region. It supposedly radiates outwards from that internal change.
Okay, so this personal shift is then linked to something bigger.
Yeah.
This Derek Bang movement you mentioned.
Right. And the speaker addresses the elephant in the room pretty directly.
Yeah.
The accusation that it's a cult. The speaker says point blank, not a cult, but framed that way. They insist it's just biblical evangelism.
How do they back that up, that claim that it's biblical?
They draw parallels. They argued the flow of their message and methods is very similar to Jesus training his disciples and the early church in Acts.
Like the Great Commission in Matthew.
Exactly. Matthew 28.1820, go, make disciples, baptize, teach. They see themselves in that lineage, in that flow.
And this flow, they describe it as having stages, right?
Yeah.
A sort of historical progression for the movement.
Yeah, they outline a whole sequence. It starts with what they call the 5 basics.
Which are?
Derek Bang itself, team ministry, mission home, specialty ministry, and regional ministry. That's the foundation.
Okay. And after the basics?
Then comes the camp era. That's presented as a distinct phase.
Followed by?
What they term the journey waypoint landmark era. Seems like a period of defining the path.
Okay. Journey, waypoint, landmark. And then?
And the concentration era. This sounds like a more focused phase. Finding specific people, prepared disciples among the crowds.
And really focusing on them.
Apparently so. They even mention Satsang concentration, intensive work with these selected individuals.
Is there a goal within that concentration?
Yeah, the source talks about finding your 8 missions, identifying your fundamental, basic, and challenge missions within their system.
8 missions.
Yeah, okay.
And the final stage mentioned?
The meditation era, which seems to be about living this out constantly. 247, Always, with a global focus, 237 nations, 5,000 tribes.
Wow, that's quite a scope.
The overarching belief presented is that this whole journey, this sequence, is God fully working. It's fulfilling that message flow they trace back to Christ.
Okay, let's circle back to the individual for a moment. The sermon talks about needing to care for people after they accept the message, right? Why is that so important?
Well, the point made is that new believers are bound to hit struggles, conflicts, problems. Life happens.
Sure.
And if they don't get answers or guidance rooted in this framework for those times, the sermon suggests they can't really grow. They might fall away.
That seems practical. Is that where the story about visiting a family fits in?
Exactly. The speaker tells about visiting a new family, seeing the woman crying. It's used to highlight this need you have to understand people's hearts, their real struggles, and offer relevant answers.
Answers based on this core message.
Yes. Answers derived from understanding Jesus is Christ and how it applies to their specific situation.
And the sermon suggests this helps prevent disillusionment.
That seems to be the idea. If people truly grasp their identity in Christ as this message defines it, they won't be so easily disappointed by, say, imperfect people in the church.
Like the story about Elder Kim Yun-sik. Was that the connection?
Potentially, yeah. Perhaps implying that relying solely on human relationships, even good ones, isn't the ultimate foundation. Understanding your spiritual identity is key.
There was also a really striking story about the speaker's own father.
Oh, yeah, that was powerful. It's presented as a major example of God stepping in.
What happened again?
The speaker shared about witnessing to his father, who was an elder but had a stroke. His father accepted Christ, according to the sermon, and then experienced healing, was able to stand up.
Wow.
It's used to show God's power, but also how evangelism opportunities can come out of really tough times.
It really feels like this theme of answers runs through the whole thing, not just for crises, but for the big questions too.
Definitely. The sermon basically asks those universal questions. Who am I? Where am I? How should I live? What should I do? What's my legacy?
The fundamental stuff.
Right. And the assertion is understanding Jesus is Christ provides complete answers, wanjandap to all of them, start to finish.
So for you listening, if you're searching for that kind of clarity, that sense of purpose and identity, this sermon is basically saying, here's the framework, here are the complete answers.
It's positioned as the ultimate solution to those deep life questions.
Looking forward, the sermon also paints a picture of the future, doesn't it? Where the movement is heading.
Yes, it does. It points to the rise of mental and spiritual problems in society today.
Which are certainly increasing.
And the belief expressed is that God will raise up churches, presumably churches within this movement, equipped to bring healing to those issues.
Healing.
Okay.
And there's a big emphasis on young people.
Huge emphasis. They talk about the next generation, calling them remnants, and the goal of raising them as spiritual summits.
Spiritual summits. Interesting term. Any specific groups they're focused on reaching?
2 were mentioned specifically. Multicultural people, acknowledging South Korea is now multicultural.
Right.
And also identifying and reaching elites from developing countries. That was quite specific.
Throughout the whole sermon, you really get a sense of, well, gratitude from the speaker.
Oh, absolutely. A very strong sense of thankfulness for being part of this specific flow, this thing they see God doing through history.
Even small things seem loaded with meaning for the speaker.
Yeah, like mentioning a tie given by an elder or the Dhaka Bang belt with the D on it. These little personal items become symbols and purpose of being in that flow.
And success or blessing isn't seen as coming from personal effort.
Not primarily, no. The message is clear. It's about being aligned with this divine current. Phrases like, nothing I started myself, truly God's grace, really emphasize that.
It's about being in the right place in this flow rather than striving on your own.
That's the core belief presented. That's where the blessing comes from.
Okay, so let's try and sum up this deep dive. We've explored this sermon that really centers everything on realizing Jesus is Christ.
And how that realization is meant to trigger profound personal transformation, affecting, well, everything in life.
We looked at how this connects to the Dhaka Bang movement, its history, its stages, its mission, as laid out in the source.
And the crucial importance placed on caring for people practically, giving them answers for their struggles.
Right, using those personal stories, the father's healing, the visits, to illustrate the points.
And offering this framework as the source of complete answers to those fundamental life questions we all ask.
Plus that future vision. Healing, the next generation. Specific outreach goals.
All wrapped up in that deep sense of gratitude for being part of what's seen as God's ongoing work.
So the central claim, really, is that this realization, Jesus Christ is the key to change, to answers, to participating in something bigger.
And the sermon explicitly states, being in this flow is the greatest blessing. So maybe a final thought for you listening, sparked by this source. What does it mean for you to find or identify a flow, whether of belief, purpose, or action that feels truly larger than yourself? Something to think about.